My stepmom said I wasn't family, just a guest, so I acted like one, and she wasn't ready for it. It happened during a fight about my college fund. Dad had remarried Veronica when I was 14, and by the time I turned 17, she'd made it crystal clear where I stood. "This is my house now," she'd say whenever I left dishes in the sink. "Your father and I are building our life together." The hour never included me. The college fund argument started when I found out she'd convinced Dad to redirect my education money toward a kitchen renovation. "You can take out loans like everyone else," she said, examining paint samples. "We need to invest in our home. Not my home, apparently. Just theirs." That's when she said it. The words that changed everything. "You need to understand something. You're not really family anymore. You're more like a guest who's overstayed their welcome." Dad stood there, silent. He didn't defend me, didn't correct her, just looked at his shoes like they were suddenly fascinating. Fine, I could be a guest. I started that night. Guests don't do household chores, so I stopped doing dishes, laundry, or cleaning anything except my own room. When Veronica complained about the mess, I smiled politely. "Sorry, I'm just a guest. I wouldn't want to overstep." The kitchen became a disaster zone within 3 days. She had to cancel her book club because the house was such a wreck. Guests don't contribute to household expenses, so I stopped splitting the grocery bills or chipping in for utilities. When they ordered takeout, I ordered my own separate meal and charged it to Dad's credit card. Guests expect to be fed after all. The credit card statement that month was astronomical. But here's where it got interesting. Guests also don't owe their hosts emotional labor or loyalty. When Veronica's mother came for Thanksgiving and complained about the dry turkey, I agreed enthusiastically. "I know, right? Veronica's never been great in the kitchen." When her sister asked how we were all getting along, I smiled sweetly. "Oh, Veronica's made it very clear I'm just a temporary guest here. Very temporary." Her family dinner became increasingly uncomfortable as I treated every gathering like a hotel stay, polite but distant. I'd excuse myself early, mention how I couldn't wait to leave, and thank them for their hospitality with exaggerated formality. Then I discovered something. Guests have rights that family members don't. I researched tenant laws in our state. Turns out I'd lived there continuously for over 3 years. That made me a legal tenant, regardless of what Veronica called me, which meant they couldn't just kick me out. They'd need to give me 60 days written notice and follow formal eviction procedures. When Veronica tried to change the locks during my school day, I called the police. The officer was not amused to learn she'd illegally locked out a legal tenant. She had to let me back in and got a warning about illegal eviction attempts. The real chaos started when I began treating their home like an Airbnb property. I started leaving reviews. Not publicly, but I'd email their friends and family detailed feedback. "Great location, but the host has boundary issues. The amenities need upgrading. Would not recommend for long-term stays." Dad's brother thought it was hilarious. Veronica did not. But I'd made a crucial discovery while researching tenant rights. Something about the house ownership that didn't quite add up. The deed had some very interesting details about the original purchase agreement. Details involving my mom's life insurance money that had supposedly gone into a trust for me. Money that had mysteriously funded their down payment 8 years ago. I'd been asking the wrong questions this whole time, and now I was about to ask the right ones. The county records office was a dingy government building that smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. I told Dad I had a school project on local history. He barely looked up from his phone when I left. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain, pulled up the property records. "You said 447 Oakmont Drive?" "Yes, ma'am." She squinted at the screen. "Purchased 8 years ago. Original owners were..." She paused. "Richard Thornton and Linda Thornton." Richard was my dad. Linda was my mom. "Can you see the financial details? Like where the down payment came from?" She clicked through several screens. "Says here the down payment of $87,000 came from a life insurance payout. Beneficiary was..." More clicking. "Someone named Cameron Thornton." Me. I was Cameron Thornton. "But the house is in both names? My dad and my mom?" "Initially, yes. But there was a deed modification filed 6 years ago." She turned the monitor so I could see. "After Linda Thornton's death, ownership transferred fully to Richard Thornton. Then 2 years later, another modification adding Veronica Marsh as co-owner. I took photos of everything. The original deed, the modification, the financing documents that clearly showed my mother's life insurance money, left to me, had purchased the house I was now being called a guest in. My hands were shaking as I walked to my car. This wasn't just about a college fund anymore. This was theft. My mom had died in a car accident when I was 9. She'd left me a $200,000 life insurance policy to be held in trust until I turned 18. Dad was the trustee. He was supposed to manage it for my benefit. Instead, he'd used $87,000 for a house down payment. Then, put it in his name. Then added his new wife to the deed. My inheritance had literally built the roof over their heads, and now they were treating me like an inconvenient stranger beneath it. I drove to the public library and spent 4 hours researching trust law and fiduciary duty. Dad, as trustee, had a legal obligation to use the money solely for my benefit. Using it to buy himself a house definitely didn't qualify. This was textbook misappropriation of trust funds. The statute of limitations in our state was 3 years from when I discovered the breach. I'd just discovered it. The clock started today. That night at dinner, I acted normal. Dad asked about my school project. I smiled and said it went well. Learned a lot about property ownership. Veronica barely looked up from her phone, scrolling through Pinterest kitchen designs. Our kitchen, built with my money. "By the way," I said casually, "when I turn 18 next month, I'll need access to my trust fund. You know, Mom's life insurance money. I want to review the statements before I file my college applications." Dad's fork clattered against his plate. Veronica's head snapped up. "Right," Dad said slowly. "We should talk about that." "What's there to talk about? It's my money. From my mom. For my future." "It's complicated," he said. "Uncomplicated." Veronica cut in. "Your father made investments on your behalf. Very smart investments that will pay off in the long run." "What investments?" Silence. Long, thick silence. The house, Dad finally admitted. We used part of the fund for the down payment, but you'll get it back when we sell. With appreciation. You'll actually make money. When are you planning to sell? More silence. You're not planning to sell, are you? You just stole my inheritance and hoped I'd never find out. Watch your tone, Veronica snapped. We gave you a home, food, clothes. That money went toward supporting you. The money was already mine, and supporting me is literally what parents are supposed to do. You don't get credit for not making your kid homeless. Go to your room, Dad said. This is a hotel, remember? Guests don't get sent to their rooms. But I'll retire for the evening. I stood, pushed in my chair. Oh, and Dad, as trustee, you're required to provide annual accountings of the trust. I'll need all statements from the past 9 years. You have 30 days to provide them, or I'll file a complaint with the probate court. I'd learned that from the library, too. Trustees who fail to provide accountings can be removed and surcharged for any losses. The look on his face was worth everything. Over the next week, I became a documentation machine. I photographed every room in the house, noting all the improvements they'd made with our money. The kitchen renovation, the master bathroom remodel, the finished basement, all funded by the college fund they'd redirected, and, I suspected, additional chunks of my trust. I created a spreadsheet tracking every dollar I could account for. The original $200,000 from Mom's insurance, the $87,000 down payment, the $45,000 for the kitchen, another $30,000 for their bathroom, the college fund of $23,000 that should have still been growing. By my calculation, they'd burned through at least $185,000 of my money. I also started documenting their behavior toward me. I set up my phone to record our conversations, got Veronica on tape calling me a guest multiple times, recorded Dad admitting he'd used trust funds for the house, documented every canceled plan, every dismissal, every time they chose their wants over my needs. Then I filed for emancipation. In our state, you could petition for emancipation at 17 if you could prove you were financially independent and living separately from your parents was in your best interest. I had a part-time job at the bookstore making $800 a month. I'd saved $4,000 over the past 2 years. I had a friend whose family had agreed to rent me their garage apartment for $400 a month once I got emancipation. The petition hearing was set for 3 weeks before my 18th birthday. You're doing what? Dad's face turned purple when the sheriff served him the papers. Emancipating myself. Since I'm just a guest anyway, there's no real family tie to maintain. This just makes it legal. This is insane. You can't just leave. Actually, if the judge approves, I can. And then, as an emancipated minor, I can sue you in my own right for the misappropriation of my trust fund. Veronica appeared from the kitchen. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything we've done for you. I turned my phone toward her, recording. Can you elaborate on what you've done for me? Besides steal my inheritance and call me a guest in the house my mother's death paid for? Her face went white. That's what I thought. I headed for my room. I'll be moving out within the month. You might want to start looking for a smaller house. I'll be collecting my $185,000, plus interest, plus court costs, plus damages for breach of fiduciary duty. The next 3 weeks were the most uncomfortable of my life. Dad tried reasoning with me, offering to work something out. Veronica went between ignoring me completely and having public meltdowns about my selfishness. I just counted down the days. The emancipation hearing was surprisingly straightforward. The judge reviewed my evidence. I had stable employment, a residence lined up, a detailed budget, and clear reasons why living with my parents was detrimental to my well-being. Mr. Thornton, the judge said, did you use funds from your daughter's trust for your personal benefit? Dad's lawyer had advised him to take the fifth. He sat silent. Did you inform your daughter about these expenditures? More silence. Did you provide annual accountings as required by law? Dad finally spoke. Your Honor, I was managing the money for her benefit. The house appreciated in value. She'll benefit from that. Did she benefit from the kitchen renovation? The bathroom remodel? Did these improvements serve her needs or yours? No answer. The judge granted my emancipation. I walked out of that courthouse legally an adult at 17, free from their control, and finally able to sue them properly. The trust lawsuit came next. I found a lawyer who took it on contingency. He was a shark in a cheap suit who specialized in fiduciary misconduct. This is the easiest case I've seen all year, he said after reviewing my evidence. Your father violated every duty a trustee owes. We're going to destroy him. The lawsuit demanded return of all misappropriated funds plus 18% interest, a full accounting of the trust since Mom's death, removal of Dad as trustee, appointment of an independent trustee, compensation for damages, and attorney's fees. The total came to $287,000. Dad didn't have $287,000. He had a house. I moved into the garage apartment on a Saturday. It was small, just 400 square feet, but it was mine. My friend's parents, the Kowalskis, were incredibly kind. They helped me move my stuff, invited me to family dinners, and never once made me feel like a burden. You're always welcome here, Mrs. Kowalski said, hugging me. Not as a guest, as family. I cried for the first time in months. The discovery phase of the lawsuit was brutal. My lawyer subpoenaed every bank record, every credit card statement, every receipt for the past 9 years. What we found was worse than I'd imagined. Dad hadn't just used my money for the house. He'd used it for everything. Vacations to Hawaii, Veronica's car, designer furniture, country club memberships. They'd been living a lifestyle funded entirely by my dead mother's life insurance while I wore thrift store clothes and worked part-time to save for college. The total misappropriation was $178,000. The remaining $22,000 sat in an account he'd apparently forgotten about, earning minimal interest. They spent your entire childhood inheritance on themselves, my lawyer said, his jaw tight. Every penny your mother left to secure your future, They pissed away on luxuries while telling you to take out loans for college. The trial date was set for February, 3 months after my 18th birthday. 3 months of Dad calling, begging me to drop the lawsuit. 3 months of Veronica leaving vicious voicemails that my lawyer saved as evidence of harassment. Christmas was strange. The Kowalskis invited me to celebrate with them. They had 3 kids of their own, but they made room for me at their table, bought me presents, and treated me like I belonged. Meanwhile, Dad sent a text. "Come home for Christmas. We're still family." I didn't respond. The preliminary hearing in January was just to address motions, but it gave me my first look at their defense strategy, which was apparently to blame me. Their lawyer argued I was a spoiled brat who didn't appreciate my father's sacrifices, that the house was an investment in our collective future, that I was tearing apart a loving family over a misunderstanding about money, that teenagers shouldn't be allowed to sue their parents just because they're mad about household rules. The judge was not impressed. "Counsel, this isn't about household rules. This is about a trustee who used $178,000 in trust funds for personal expenses. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft." The defense pivoted. Actually, they argued, Dad had kept detailed records showing every expense was for my benefit. The house gave me shelter. The vacations were family bonding. The country club gave me opportunities to network. Then you'll have no trouble producing those records in discovery, my lawyer said smoothly. They couldn't, because they didn't exist. By the time the trial started in February, Dad's legal team was in shambles. They'd gone through 3 lawyers, each one apparently realizing they had an unwinnable case. The trial lasted 4 days. My lawyer systematically destroyed every argument they made. He showed that I'd been excluded from the vacations Veronica's kids got to attend. Proved the country club membership was only in Dad and Veronica's names, not mine. Demonstrated that the house purchase specifically violated the trust terms, which stated the money was for educational expenses and future financial security, not real estate investments that benefited the trustee. The most damaging evidence came from Dad's own emails. My lawyer had subpoenaed his Gmail account and found years of correspondence with Veronica, planning their lifestyle upgrades. "Once Cameron's money clears, we can finally get that kitchen done," Veronica had written. "The trust has plenty. She'll never know the difference," Dad had replied. The jury heard that. They heard all of it. Every casual discussion of spending my inheritance while I worked retail to save for college. Every dismissive comment about how I wouldn't understand financial planning. Every luxurious purchase made with money my dying mother had left to protect me. On the 4th day, the jury deliberated for 47 minutes. They found in my favor on every count. Breach of fiduciary duty, $178,000 in misappropriated funds, interest at 18% over 9 years, $289,140. Punitive damages for willful misconduct, $200,000. Attorney's fees, $87,000. Total judgment, $754,440. Dad went gray when the verdict was read. Veronica started crying. Their lawyer slumped in his chair. The judge ordered them to pay within 60 days or face foreclosure on the house. They didn't have $754,140. They barely had $754. My lawyer filed for foreclosure on day 61. The house went up for auction. It sold for $430,000. After paying off their mortgage and the real estate fees, there was $287,000 left. Not enough to cover the judgment, but enough to hurt. My lawyer went after their other assets. Veronica's car got repossessed. Their bank accounts were seized. Their wages were garnished at 25% per paycheck. They had to move into a 2-bedroom apartment in the bad part of town. Dad's credit was destroyed. Veronica filed for divorce within 6 months, claiming she'd been deceived about the financial situation. I didn't feel bad about any of it. With the money from the judgment, I paid for my first year of college in full, registered for classes at the state university, got a small apartment near campus that was mine, all mine, paid for by money that should have been mine all along. Dad called once after the foreclosure. "I hope you're happy," he said bitterly. "You destroyed your own family over money. You destroyed our family when you married someone who called your daughter a guest." I replied, "You destroyed it when you stole from me. You destroyed it every time you chose her over me. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped letting you destroy me." I hung up. The last contact I had was a Facebook message from Veronica's daughter from her first marriage, someone I'd barely met. "You ruined my mom's life," it said. "She did everything for you and you threw it in her face. I hope you can live with yourself." I blocked her without responding. Here's the thing about standing up for yourself. People will call you selfish, ungrateful, vindictive. They'll say you're destroying families and burning bridges and being cruel. They'll rewrite history to make themselves the victims and you the villain. Let them. I spent 17 years being treated like I didn't matter, being told my needs were less important than their wants, watching my inheritance get spent on their comfort while I was expected to be grateful for the bare minimum. I'm not the villain in this story. I'm the one who finally said enough. 2 years later, I'm thriving. I made the dean's list my freshman year. I'm studying forensic accounting, actually, inspired by my own case. I want to help other people whose trustees have stolen from them. The Kowalskis came to my 20th birthday party. They brought cake and presents and treated me like the daughter they'd adopted in spirit, if not in law. I'm teaching their youngest daughter to drive. I babysit their kids when they need date nights. I spend holidays at their table. This is what family actually looks like. Dad reached out on my 20th birthday. A short text. "Happy birthday. I'm sorry for everything. Too little. Too late." I never responded. Sometimes people ask if I regret how hard I went after them, if I wish I'd been more forgiving, more understanding, if family should mean something even when they hurt you. My answer is always the same. I gave them 17 years to treat me like family. They chose not to. So I treated them like what they called me, a guest who overstayed their welcome and then checked out. The difference is I left them with a bill they couldn't afford. And I've never slept better. But there's a part of the story I haven't told yet. Something that happened a year after the trial that changed everything I thought I knew. It started with a letter, not from Dad or Veronica, but from a lawyer named Phyllis Chen representing someone called Eleanor Marsh. I almost threw it away, assuming it was another angry missive from Veronica's family. But something made me open it. Eleanor Marsh was Veronica's mother. I'd met her briefly at that Thanksgiving where everything first started falling apart. She'd seemed like a typical wealthy grandmother, all pearls and judgment. The letter requested a meeting. No demands, no threats. Just a request to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near campus. I brought my phone set to record. I wasn't walking into an ambush. Eleanor arrived exactly on time, impeccably dressed, but she looked older than I remembered, tired. She ordered Earl Grey tea and sat down across from me with careful precision. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure why I did," she smiled faintly. "Fair enough." She wrapped her hands around her teacup. "I want to tell you something about your stepmother. About Veronica. If this is some pitch to get me to forgive her, it's not." She met my eyes. "It's about why she is the way she is. I'm not excusing her behavior, but I think you deserve to understand it." I waited. "Veronica was engaged once before your father, to a man named David. They were happy, planning a wedding, building a life." Eleanor's voice went quiet. "David had a daughter from a previous relationship, Rebecca. She was 14 when Veronica entered the picture. Something cold settled in my stomach. Veronica tried so hard with that girl. She wanted to be her friend, her mentor, her mother figure. She poured everything into that relationship. And Rebecca," Eleanor paused. "Rebecca was smart, calculated. She told David that Veronica was cruel to her when he wasn't around. She manufactured evidence, staged situations to make Veronica look abusive. Why would she do that? Because she wanted her father to herself. She couldn't stand sharing him. By the time David figured out the truth, it was too late. Rebecca's lies had destroyed the relationship. David broke off the engagement." Eleanor pulled out an old photograph. A younger Veronica with a man I didn't recognize. They looked genuinely happy. 6 months later, David died in a boating accident. Rebecca inherited everything. Every penny. She cut off contact with Veronica completely, sending her one final message. "You were never family, just an inconvenience." The words hit me like ice water. When Veronica met your father, she was terrified of the same thing happening again. Terrified of a stepdaughter who would manipulate situations, turn the father against her, and take everything. She built walls before you could hurt her. She treated you like a threat, because the last time she loved a stepchild, it destroyed her life. I sat frozen, processing this. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty," Eleanor continued. "What she did to you was wrong. Stealing your money was wrong. Calling you a guest was cruel. You had every right to fight back." She leaned forward. "But I thought you should know that you weren't just fighting a greedy stepmother. You were fighting her trauma. And you won." I didn't know what to say. Eleanor slid a document across the table. "Veronica is in therapy now. Real therapy. Not just court-ordered sessions. She's working through what happened with Rebecca, what she did to you, and why she couldn't separate the two." She stood up. "She asked me to give you this. It's a letter. You don't have to read it. You don't owe her anything. But it's yours if you want it." She left before I could respond. I sat there for an hour, staring at the sealed envelope. Part of me wanted to burn it. Part of me was curious despite myself. I opened it that night in my apartment. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in careful script. Veronica detailed everything Eleanor had told me and more. The full story of Rebecca's manipulation, how it had left her with PTSD and trust issues, how when she met Dad, she was convinced I was going to do the same thing. "I projected my fear onto you," she wrote. "I saw Rebecca in every action you took, even innocent ones. When you were quiet, I thought you were plotting. When you were friendly, I thought you were manipulating. When your father took your side on anything, I was certain you were turning him against me." She described how the paranoia had spiraled, how she'd convinced herself that calling me a guest was setting a boundary, when really it was pushing away someone who had never wanted to hurt her in the first place. "I stole from you," the letter continued. "I justified it by telling myself you'd eventually take everything anyway, so why not take it first? But that was my trauma talking, not reality. You were a child who'd lost her mother. You deserved love and security, and I gave you neither." The final paragraph broke me a little. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that you weren't the problem. You never were. The problem was me, seeing ghosts where there was only a girl who needed a family. I'm sorry I couldn't be that for you. I'm sorry I became the villain in your story when I was supposed to be the adult. I'm sorry for everything." I cried reading it. Not from sympathy exactly. More from the sheer weight of realizing that hurt people really do hurt people, and sometimes the villains in our stories are just victims of earlier chapters we never got to read. But here's the thing. Understanding someone's trauma doesn't erase the harm they caused. Veronica's past with Rebecca explained her behavior. It didn't excuse it. It didn't undo the years of emotional abuse or the financial theft or the way she'd made me feel like nothing in my own home. I understood her better now, but I still didn't forgive her. I wrote a response. Short, clinical. "I received your letter. I appreciate you sharing your story. It helps me understand what happened, though it doesn't change what you did. I hope therapy helps you heal, but I need you to understand that your healing can't come at my expense. We won't have a relationship. I wish you well, but from a distance." I mailed it and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not guilt. Just the quiet understanding that some bridges burn for good reasons, and that's okay. Eleanor sent one more letter a few months later. Veronica was doing better. The divorce from Dad was finalized. She'd moved to a different state for a fresh start. She was working again, paying back the judgment slowly through wage garnishment, but also volunteering at a women's shelter, helping others work through trauma. She says helping them helps her, Eleanor wrote. She's trying to be the person she should have been for you. Good for her. I meant that genuinely. I hope she heals. I hope she finds peace. I hope she helps those women and doesn't repeat her mistakes. But she doesn't get to have me in her life while she does it. Dad's story is less redemptive. He never took responsibility, never apologized sincerely. He'd remarried within 2 years, this time to someone younger, with no kids. I heard through family friends that he learned his lesson about stepmothers and stepkids. Now he just avoids the whole situation. His brother, my Uncle Kevin, reached out on Dad's behalf once. He misses you, Kevin said. He knows he messed up. Does he? I asked. Or does he miss having someone to control? Kevin didn't have an answer for that. The final twist came at Christmas 3 years after the trial. I was at the Kowalski's place, helping Mrs. Kowalski make pierogies when my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Cameron, it's Rebecca. My blood froze. Rebecca from your stepmother's past. I heard about what happened through the family grapevine. I needed to talk to you. Why? Because you did what I should have done. We met the next day at the same coffee shop where Eleanor had told me Rebecca's story. The woman who walked in looked nothing like I'd imagined. She was in her early 30s, professionally dressed, but there was something haunted in her eyes. I've been following your case, Rebecca said, sitting down. Well, the public records of it anyway. What you did to Veronica, how you fought back. Eleanor told me what you did to her, with your father. I bet she told you I was a manipulative monster. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. That's the story Veronica tells. Is it not true? Parts of it are true. I did turn my father against her. I did manufacture evidence. I did destroy their relationship. She looked down at her hands. But Eleanor probably didn't tell you why. Here we go, I thought. Another layer to this nightmare. Veronica was cheating on my father, with his business partner. I found out when I was 14 and saw them together at a hotel. I told Dad, but Veronica convinced him I was lying, that I was jealous and acting out. Rebecca's voice was steady but cold. So yes, I got calculating. I documented everything. I staged situations to catch her. I became obsessed with proving I wasn't crazy. And eventually, I proved it. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos. Screenshots of old emails, old messages, all dated from that time. Evidence of an affair Veronica had carefully hidden. By the time my father believed me, he was broken. He called off the wedding, but he was never the same. He died 8 months later. The official report said it was a boating accident, but he was drunk. So drunk he could barely stand. He drove that boat into rocks at full speed. Jesus. I inherited everything, and I did cut Veronica off. Because she'd tried to gaslight me for 2 years. She tried to convince everyone I was unstable. She'd done everything possible to paint me as the villain while she destroyed my father. Rebecca met my eyes. So yeah, I was cold to her. I told her she was never family, because she wasn't. She was a parasite who nearly succeeded in taking everything. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The point is, Rebecca continued, Veronica is very good at playing the victim. Very good at reframing her own actions as responses to other people's cruelty. She did it to me, and I'm guessing she's trying to do it to you now. Her mother told me Veronica has PTSD from what you did. She probably does. But her PTSD isn't from me being cruel. It's from getting caught being cruel and losing everything because of it. Rebecca stood up. I don't know what happened between you and Veronica, but whatever it was, I'm betting she deserved it. And I'm betting she's now telling people you're the next me, the evil stepchild who ruined her life. She left her contact information. If you ever want to talk to someone who actually knows what Veronica's capable of, call me. I sat there for 2 hours after she left, my mind spinning. Who was telling the truth? Eleanor, who said Rebecca was a manipulative child who destroyed Veronica's life. Or Rebecca, who said Veronica was a cheater who gaslit her for years. Maybe they both were. Maybe trauma and villains aren't mutually exclusive. Maybe Veronica had been hurt by Rebecca's campaign against her, even if that campaign was justified. Maybe Rebecca had become calculating and cold, even if Veronica had driven her to it. Maybe everyone in this story was both victim and villain, depending on which chapter you read. But here's what I knew for certain. Whatever had happened between Veronica and Rebecca, it wasn't my fault. I wasn't Rebecca. I hadn't manipulated anyone. I hadn't destroyed a relationship for sport or revenge. I'd simply stood up for myself when I was treated like nothing. If Veronica saw Rebecca in me, that was her problem, not mine. If her trauma made her lash out at an innocent kid, that was still abuse. Context might explain behavior, but it doesn't excuse harm. I never contacted Rebecca again. I never responded to Eleanor's subsequent letters. I let that entire complicated mess stay in the past where it belonged. My life moved forward. I graduated college with honors. I got my forensic accounting license. I now work at a firm that specializes in fiduciary misconduct cases, helping people just like me recover what was stolen from them. Last month, I won a case for a 16-year-old whose guardian had embezzled her settlement from a car accident. $340,000 stolen, spent on the guardian's drug habit and gambling debts. We recovered every penny plus damages. The look on that kid's face when she realized she could still go to college, still have a future. That's why I do this job. I also reconnected with Dad's side of the family. My Uncle Kevin and his wife have been wonderful. They apologized for not intervening when I was younger, for not seeing what was happening. We have dinner once a month now. Their kids call me Aunt Cameron. My cousin Brooke asked me once if I ever regretted going so hard after Dad and Veronica. No, I said. I regret that I had to. I regret that they put me in a position where nuclear options were the only option, but I don't regret protecting myself. She nodded. Good. Some people don't deserve second chances. It's not about what they deserve, I replied. It's about what I deserved, and I deserved better than what they gave me. That's the real lesson here. Not that revenge is sweet, or that winning feels good, though both those things are true. The real lesson is that you teach people how to treat you, and if you let them treat you like nothing, they will. I spent 17 years accepting scraps and calling it love. I spent years believing that family meant tolerating mistreatment because blood ties or marriage licenses make you obligated to suffer in silence. Then Veronica called me a guest, and something clicked. If I was a guest, I had rights. If I wasn't family, I owed them nothing. And if they were going to treat me like an outsider in my own home, I'd act like one until they understood what they'd lost. They never did understand. Not really. In their version of the story, I'm the ungrateful daughter who destroyed a loving family over money. They tell people I was greedy, vindictive, cold. Let them. I know the truth. I was a child whose mother died, whose father remarried someone who saw me as a threat, who stole my inheritance and told me to be grateful for it, who called me a guest and then was shocked when I left. I'm not the villain. I'm the survivor. And if surviving meant burning down the house they built with my money, then I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Some bridges are meant to burn, some families are meant to end, and some guests check out permanently, leaving nothing behind but ashes and unpaid debts. I'm not bitter about it anymore. I'm not angry. I'm just done. And honestly, that's the best revenge of all. The epilogue to all of this came 5 years after the trial, on what would have been my mother's 50th birthday. I drove to her grave for the first time since I was 9. I'd avoided it for years, too angry at the unfairness of her death, too hurt by what came after. But something about turning 23 and being older than she'd been in half my memories made me finally go. Her headstone was simple. Linda Marie Thornton, beloved wife and mother. The grass around it was neatly trimmed, flowers recently placed. I'd brought my own flowers. Sunflowers, her favorite. As I knelt to place them, I noticed the other flowers weren't from a florist. They were wildflowers, carefully arranged. The kind Mom used to pick on our walks when I was little. Someone else had been here recently. I come every month, a voice said behind me. I spun around. Dad stood there looking older than I remembered, grayer. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, not his usual business casual. What are you doing here? I asked. Same as you, visiting her. He kept his distance, hands in his pockets. I've been coming since everything fell apart. Started after you left. Felt like I needed to tell her I'm sorry. For stealing from her daughter? He flinched but didn't argue. For all of it. For not protecting you. For choosing Veronica over you. For being the kind of father she'd be ashamed of. We stood in silence for a long moment. I know you won't forgive me, he said finally. I don't blame you. I wouldn't forgive me either. But I wanted you to know that I know. I know what I did. I know what I lost. His voice cracked. I lost you, and you were the only thing I had left of her. I wanted to stay angry. Part of me wanted to spit venom, list his failures, make him hurt the way he'd hurt me. But standing at my mother's grave, I just felt tired. You're right, I said quietly. I won't forgive you. What you did was unforgivable. You stole from me. You abandoned me. You chose a woman who hated me over your own daughter. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. But, I continued, for Mom's sake, I'll tell you this. I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm successful. I'm happy. I have people who love me. I have a life that matters. You didn't break me. I know, he whispered. I've been following your career. Uncle Kevin tells me things. I'm proud of you. You don't get to be proud. You weren't there. I know. Another long silence. The house sold, he said eventually. After Veronica and I split, I finally sold it. I wanted you to know that I took my half of the proceeds, all $143,000, and put it in an account for you. It won't cover what I stole. It won't fix what I broke. But it's yours, when you're ready. He pulled out a bank statement and set it on the ground, weighted with a stone, then stepped back. I'm not asking for a relationship. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did. And I'm trying, in the only way I can, to make even a tiny piece of it right. He walked away before I could respond. I looked at the bank statement. $143,000. It was in a savings account in my name, earning interest. He'd been putting money into it for 3 years. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. I folded the statement and put it in my pocket. I'd think about it later. For now, I knelt by Mom's grave and finally said the things I'd been holding in for 14 years. I miss you, I whispered. I miss you so much, Mom. And I'm sorry I couldn't visit before. I was too angry at everyone, including you for leaving. Tears fell. But I'm okay now. I promise I'm okay. I fought for myself. I fought for what you left me, and I won. The wind rustled through the trees, and for just a moment I felt her there. Proud, sad, but proud. I hope you'd be proud of me too, I said, even though I had to burn everything down to survive it. I stayed until sunset, telling her about my life, about college, about the Kowalskis, about my job helping kids like me, about the person I'd become in spite of everything. When I finally left, I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying her loss and my anger and the weight of everything that came after for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. I never called Dad. I never touched that money, at least not for years. I didn't need it. I'd built my own life, funded by my own work, owing nothing to anyone. But when I bought my first house 3 years later, I used his $143,000 as the down payment. Not because I'd forgiven him, but because it was mine, what was left of what should have been mine all along. And because my mother would have wanted me to have a home, a real home, where I was never a guest. The house is small but perfect. 3 bedrooms, 1 for me, 1 for an office, and 1 for the foster kids I started taking in last year. Because here's the final thing I learned. When you survive people treating you like you don't belong, you become really good at making sure others feel like they do. I've had 6 foster kids come through so far. Kids whose parents failed them. Kids who were called burdens or problems or unwanted. Kids who needed someone to prove that they mattered. I tell them the same thing every time. You're not a guest here. This is your home, your family. And I mean it. That's how the story ends. Not with reconciliation or forgiveness or neat redemption arcs. It ends with me, in a home bought with money that was stolen and then partially returned, taking care of kids who need what I needed. It ends with me being the person I wish I'd had. And honestly, that's better than any revenge I could have planned. Veronica was right about one thing. I wasn't family, not to them, but I found my family anyway. I built it from scratch. From the Kowalskis who took me in, from Uncle Kevin who came around, from the kids who need me now, from the chosen family I've created through sheer determination not to let their cruelty define me. I'm 28 now. I have a career I love, a house I own, and a life that's entirely mine. Sometimes clients recognize my name from the lawsuit. It made local news back then. The 17-year-old who sued her father and won. They ask if it was worth it. Every single time, I say yes. Because it wasn't really about the money. It was never about the money. It was about refusing to be erased. Refusing to let them steal not just my inheritance, but my dignity, my worth, my right to be treated like I mattered. The money was just how I kept score. The real victory was walking away and building something better, something real. Something that doesn't cost $754,140 in legal judgments, but is worth infinitely more. That's what happens when you call someone a guest. You might think you're setting boundaries. You might think you're protecting yourself, but what you're actually doing is setting them free. And sometimes, the person you free becomes stronger than you ever imagined. Becomes someone who doesn't just survive your cruelty, but transforms it into purpose. Veronica thought she was putting me in my place when she said I wasn't family. She was right. I wasn't their family. I was so much more. And now, every time a scared teenager sits in my office with documents proving their guardian stole from them, I tell them this story. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to let them know that fighting back is possible, that winning is possible, that surviving is possible, that being called a guest doesn't have to be an insult. Sometimes it's an invitation to leave, to check out, to find somewhere you actually belong, and to never, ever let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own life again. That's my story. That's how a stepmother calling me a guest led to me taking everything she thought was hers, building a life she could never imagine, and becoming the kind of person who makes sure no one else ever has to feel that way again. Was I harsh? Absolutely. Was I justified? You tell me. But I'll say this. I sleep better in my home, surrounded by kids who know they're wanted, than I ever did in theirs. And that in the end is all that matters.